Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move the motion on the order paper. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is the government of broken promises. This is the government who said during the last general election that they would do nothing on taxation, and yet they came straight in and placed £25 billion worth of taxation on businesses up and down our country. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, we know the consequence of that. It killed growth nearly stone dead. It has cost around £3,500 by way of lower wages alone to the average working family up and down the country. And it is a clear breach of the Labour Party's manifesto. Don't take my word for it, take Paul Johnson's word for it when he was the head of the IFS. And he has more recently been out on the airways, Madam Deputy Speaker, describing it not just as a breach of the Labour Party manifesto, but a blatant breach of the Labour Party manifesto. And then we had the then shadow DEFRA secretary out reassuring farmers, looking Tom Bradshaw, the president of the NFU, in the eye and telling him that at least when it came to inheritance tax, farmers had nothing to fear from a future Labour government. How wrong they were. The winter fuel payment debacle. Madam Deputy Speaker, they reassured pensioners up and down the country that they would not be means testing the winter fuel payment. And before somebody jumps up and says, oh, well, it only excluded millionaires, it did not. Some 80% of those pensioners living below the poverty line were denied those payments and had to go through a long and cruel winter. And the U-turn, when it finally came, will come as little comfort to those pensioners who are now about to be dragged into income tax for the first time as a result of the policies of the party opposite. When it came to council tax, we know that in opposition, the party opposite said that they would freeze council tax. And yet we have seen in the latest spending review some £7 billion increase in council tax levied across this Parliament. According to the IFS, the largest increase in council tax in a generation. And that from the party that said they would not be putting up taxes on working people. Do they not think that working people pay council tax?
Will you give way on that?
And I will certainly give way on that.
Very grateful to the Shadow Chancellor for making that point, because when it comes to working people, does he believe if you're a humble toolmaker but happen to own a small business doing so, are they a working person?
Indeed, my honourable friend is absolutely right. We need to stand up for everybody, even our toolmakers, Madam Deputy Speaker. And let's be frank, we have had to come forward with this motion today, which seeks to do nothing other than reaffirm the commitments that this party opposite has already made. And why? Because of the history, the litany of broken promises that I have just shared with the House. I'll certainly give way to my right honourable friend.
Does the Shadow Chancellor agree that following the welfare U-turns, public finances are today in a far worse state than they were a year ago when the government came to office? But there is a crucial difference, which is a year ago, this side of the House were taking difficult decisions to bring taxes down in order to grow the economy. Because they are failing to take those decisions, there's only one way taxes can go, and that is up.
Well, my right honourable and gallant friend is absolutely right. Under his stewardship, things were so much better. The reality is, as he points out, that the government has resiled from any attempt to control the welfare bill. An unfunded tax commitment of £5 billion, Madam Deputy Speaker. That, plus the U-turn on winter fuel payment, over £6 billion unfunded commitments that this government is responsible for. Unfunded commitments that they said they would never see themselves making. And my right honourable friend is absolutely right. The legacy that he left when he was Chancellor under the last government was the highest growth for our economy in the G7. We had near record levels of employment. We had near record low levels of unemployment. We had 13 consecutive months of real wage growth, and inflation had been brought down from over 11% due to the Ukraine war to bang on 2% on the day of the general election. And where is inflation now? It's almost double that which this government inherited. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman, and then I'll come to my honourable friend.
Grateful, my friend, for giving way. Given all the extraordinary, wonderful things that he's setting out, don't you think it's equally extraordinary that the British people thought you were a shower and they needed to get rid of you, and they did, and that's why you're there and we're here?
I'm not sure that the British people were seeking to get rid of me. Mel Stride.
Shall I reframe it?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think that was a gross impertinence. He also referred to you as an absolute shower, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is totally unreasonable. I've always been a great admirer of yours, as you know, and always will be. Name him, quite. But look, we have a government that is also grossly incompetent. We know that as soon as they came into office, what did they do? They talked down the economy. And it's no surprise that we have the British Chamber of Commerce saying now the #1 concern of its members are high taxes. It's no surprise that the ICAEW in their latest survey once again shows business confidence down. That for the 4th survey in a row. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to the Shadow Chancellor for giving way, but does he, amidst his quite right exposition on the subject of where the government's gone wrong, does he not have a little bit of pity for the ministers on the front bench opposite? Because after last week, it's quite clear that they're no longer responsible for the running of this government, that has been handed to the hard left, who have no interest whatever in balancing the books and don't care about rising debt, rising gilt costs and the other irresponsible outcomes of this government, which is now absolutely out of control.
Friend is absolutely right. When it comes to criticising this government, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's always confusing as to whether to address the front bench or indeed the back benches, because they're never quite in the same place. But the big mistake that the government made was to talk down the economy by going on about this confected black hole of £22 billion. Something that the OBR has already debunked. And they should stop using that number. They are the ones who created a black hole of some £6 billion, as I have just set out. They should focus not on the black hole that they have invented, but the black hole that they have created. And it is that black hole, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is creating the speculation across the summer as to what will happen now in the autumn, damaging confidence and damaging businesses up and down the country. And I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank him for giving way, but does he not accept that regardless of the actual size of the black hole left by the previous government that he's talking about, it is a significant larger number than that which he's talking about in respect to the welfare bill?
Well, I'm not sure I fully understood the point that the gentleman was making, but he did seem to at least be accepting there is a real black hole when it comes to this government of at least £6 billion. And I will give way to the right honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does my right honourable friend find it extraordinary, though, that the government, when they came to office, made a big play of putting the OBR on a pedestal? Because they didn't like the news, they now want to dismiss it and water it down.
Well, yes, exactly. They will look to any floating branch or whatever to cling on to in order to try and look a little bit better than they truly are. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, when it has also come to spending, we have seen a government that has indulged in spending like it was the 1970s. The result of this has been to push up inflation. That has led to interest rates being higher and for longer than they would otherwise have been. And it's all very well for members opposite to trumpet the fact there have been 4 interest rate cuts since they came to office. The reality is, if they had not lost control of inflation, there would have been more and they would have become more quickly. The headroom that they have, that the Chancellor has against her fiscal targets, is wafer thin. This is the usual Labour way. Spending and spending and spending until they run out of other people's money. And I give way to the honourable lady.
Shadow Chancellor for giving way, and he was talking about interest rate rises, and I just wondered if he could enlighten us as to why he thinks that we should be taking lectures on economic competence from his party with a shadow cabinet that has 16 members who served in the government of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng.
I think it would be sensible for the honourable lady actually to look at her own front bench and ask the question, why is it that they take these appalling anti-business decisions? And the answer is that hardly any of them, in fact not one senior frontbencher of her party, has any experience of private business or setting up a company, unlike on this side of the House, whether it be myself or the Shadow Home Secretary or the Shadow Business Secretary and others who actually understand the real world of business. Yes, of course, a good way for this.
The Shadow Chancellor makes a very good point. Is he surprised then by the Federation of Small Business that has come out and said for the first time ever in their index, more small businesses will contract than will grow since 2008, since records began? Is he as worried as I am of what signal that sends to those small business owners who are trying to grow for our economy?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. The reality is that if you tax something, you tend to get less of it. And this government has taxed business, and it is not therefore surprising that the economy has been damaged as a consequence. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, an often fair question asked of us on this side of the House is, well, what would we do? And let me answer that question directly now. Firstly, we would have taken very different choices. We would not have loaded up taxation on businesses and stifled growth in the way that the party opposite have. We would have focused on productivity. We wouldn't have come into office and given the train drivers 14%, the junior doctors 22%, with no strings attached whatsoever. We were told by the now Health Secretary during the run-up to the general election all we needed to do was get around the table with the unions and settle, and the problem would go away. Well, the junior doctors, Madam Deputy Speaker, are back for more. And we would, of course, I will momentarily, we would, of course, have tackled the welfare bill, as we did when we were in office. £5 billion worth of savings, as scored by the Office for Budget Responsibility, and 450,000 fewer people going on to long-term sickness benefits as a direct consequence of our policies. And we had a clear plan to go into government and save £12 billion a year in addition. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, actually, I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Chancellor for giving way. While he is engaging in such fascinating whataboutery from the dispatch box, I wonder if he would take this opportunity to say which of the 25 tax increases under the last Parliament he regrets or would undo.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think this debate actually is about the tax policy of this government, and as I have clearly set out, well, there was the small matter, to be fair, Madam Deputy Speaker, of COVID which came along and shrank the UK economy by 10% overnight. And people at that time speculated that we would see mass unemployment, the like of which our country had never ever seen. And yet, through our intervention, we made sure that that did not happen. Likewise, when the Ukraine-Russia war brought through energy price spikes, inflation to our shores, peaking at 11.1% at the back end of 2022, we took the tough decisions, along with the Bank of England, to bring that inflation down. And in the meantime, we protected millions of low-income families up and down the country for the consequences of that inflation. And that came with a £400 billion price tag. So it is not surprising that some taxes indeed had to rise in order to pay for that. But what... I'll give way to my right honourable friend.
Isn't the danger, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Shadow Chancellor is making an excellent speech, isn't the danger that if you don't actually have a prudent financial position, you end up in the position that we're now seeing from the government, with the interest on government debt going up and up and up. So we're now paying around £10 billion a year more than we would be at the general election.
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. If you look at the increasing government debt to which this government is constantly adding, and you look at the higher interest rates for longer that they are responsible for because of their extravagant spending, we are spending about £100 billion a year simply servicing that debt. That is twice what we spend on defence. That is not sustainable, and things will get worse under this government. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Chancellor for giving way. I wonder if he might elaborate on the national debt in 2010 that the previous government inherited versus what we inherited last year.
I'd be delighted to talk him through that. Thanks to the preceding Labour government, who left this country with a deficit of 10.1% or £160 billion a year, clearly we had to get on top. We had to get on top of the deficit. And it is a simple fact of economic life that if you're running a large deficit, the debt increases. But by the time of COVID, we had largely settled that deficit. And for the reasons that I gave a moment ago, of course, we added to the debt and the deficit at that point because we had to intervene to stabilise the economy. But it was the inheritance that we received in 2010 that was the start of that debt climbing. And the honourable gentleman should acquaint himself with the economic history. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is the approach that this government can take in the autumn? Well, it's not going to be saved by growth. That is for the birds. The OBR, the Bank of England, the IMF, they have all downgraded growth. The ONS has announced recently the second month in a row in which we have had an economic contraction. So how else might the Chancellor make the numbers add up? Well, despite ministers insisting that their commitment to the fiscal rules remains non-negotiable, there are reports of potential changes to the broader fiscal framework, including the early use of the flexibility of a 0.5% of GDP range for the current budget target, which will allow 12 to 13 billion of extra borrowing, but that would be, Madam Deputy Speaker, a breach of faith. And Madam Deputy Speaker, there are similar reports that ministers might move to just one OBR forecast a year to avoid an embarrassing emergency budget like we saw in March. But that would completely abandon the commitment not to sideline the OBR. So when the minister comes to the dispatch box, can he reconfirm that the government's commitment to the fiscal rules applies to the fiscal framework too, and that we will continue to have 2 OBR forecasts per year? Madam Deputy Speaker, the government should be looking not for yet more borrowing, but to be reining in spending. But the welfare debacle shows that they are utterly incapable of doing that. So that just leaves taxes. Madam Deputy Speaker, the motion today simply asks the Minister to confirm the commitment made by the Chancellor not to extend the freeze on tax thresholds. The Chancellor said specifically in her budget speech that such a move would hurt working people. She said it would take money from their pay slips. Will the right honourable gentleman, when he comes to the dispatch box, confirm that he too holds that position? And when he comes to the dispatch box, will he rule out wealth taxes? We have already seen tens of thousands of people leaving our country, high net worth individuals, who I know socialists may say, oh, well, good riddance to them, they're wealthy. Yeah. The reality is that the Adam Smith Institute calculates that the tax foregone as a consequence of their departure is equal to the tax paid by around 500,000 people on average earnings. And the party opposite has no plan to stem this exodus of talent and wealth creation. But whatever decisions are taken, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the autumn, they will be bad ones. And they may even, as nervous markets look on, prove disastrous. It may even be that this government takes us to a dark place. It is hoped not, but if history is any guide to the future, then the lights are surely flashing red. And surely, too, the British people, those hard-working men and women right up and down our country, the businesses, the entrepreneurs, the farmers toiling all hours, our charities, our hospices, our veterans, our elderly, those who embody the best, the very best of all that our country can be. Surely they deserve answers about the promises made to them and about whether their pay packets, their pensions and their savings are safe. And surely they deserve better than this wretched, rotten and defunct Labour government. Yeah.